Hiya, I am Maeve Stone. I'm an artist. I work in theatre and film, and I do a bit of activism in a couple of different areas.
Maeve, can I ask, um, was theatre always in your blood? Like back when you were younger, like how did this kind of happen? How did did you were always from an early age want to be on the stage or want to be involved in performance or making?
You're looking for the origin story.
Well, like,
I guess my mom is an artist, and my dad is a psychotherapist, which, if you put the two together, I think you get a theatre director. But I was really lucky as a teenager. I grew up in County Limerick, and there was a youth theatre, Limerick Youth Theatre, run by Kierda and Miriam at the time, and it was really beautiful work. They were two very generous women who did that thing that I think is kind of crucial when you're a teenager, of expecting more from the young people that they were working with. So they set a high bar, and it meant that the thinking and the playing kind of rose to a different level. And they're the reason I applied for theatre in at a college level. So yeah, I think that's where it started. I never wanted to be an actor, weirdly. But I was a musician, or I am a musician. But I used to gig a lot as a teenager in Limerick. I used to do singer-songwriter nights in the high stool back in the day. Partly because when I was underage, they would give you two drinks tokens. So it was a way of getting booze before I was legally allowed. So yeah, that side of performance made sense to me, but acting, I could see there was an alchemy to it that I just didn't have. And I hate being bad at things. So I guess the directing aspect of it kind of came through a real love of different kinds of art. Like, it felt to me that it was an opportunity to bring together performance, storytelling, aesthetics, music, and sort of get to use all of those different ingredients.
okay,
Yeah,
and just in relation to the music side of it, is it guitar? Is that what you play, or do you play a range of instruments? Or
I play guitar and bass, and then I have been trying to get back into violin. That's part of how I'm using my quarantine. My brother is a guitar maker, and he restored my grandmother's violin. And I played when I was a kid, but I haven't played it in, I'm gonna say, 20 years.
and could you actually play it when you were a kid? Like, it's not like picking it up from scratch now. That like you can actually.
Yeah, no, I could play. I could play when I was a child, and it's weird because there's a muscle memory that doesn't really go away, but at the same time, it definitely does. So, God have mercy on my poor housemates slash neighbours at the moment.
Treat. Yeah.
Yeah.
And what, as you kind of went through college, did you kind of, I suppose what interests me is kind of, a kind of broad question of why you do what you do. Like, what is it that kind of both drove you to kind of do the work you do and also continues to drive you to do the work you do? I know it's a very broad question, but maybe it's a good place to start.
Um, um, I don't know. Maybe I'll get a little bit honest here. I had some hard things happening when I was growing up that made home and that moment in my life kind of difficult and unsettled. And I think it also drove me to try and understand the world in a different way from quite a young age. I think an awful lot of creative instinct comes from an attempt to order things that feel very chaotic and sometimes threatening or sometimes difficult. And I think I had a masterclass in chaos and difficulty from the age of about 14 on. So I think, in a way, it was one of the ways that I coped getting through some hard stuff. Um, yeah. And I really value that. I think I think there's a real solace, and I hope a few people are getting that at the moment, given what's going on. I think there's a real solace in storytelling, because it allows us to experience things at a remove, or in a different emotional platform that can help us understand and see the things that don't make sense to us when they hit us directly. So I think, you know, at a personal level, the way that I valued storytelling and art and creativity was in my bones from a very young age. Like, my mom had us making fucking tie-dye t-shirts from the age of 6 onwards. So like, it's definitely, I had access. There's huge privilege in the access that I had. But in terms of when did it become essential for me, I think first in through music, and then through theater. Yeah, it was a way of understanding what can be incredibly difficult about the world.
And maybe sort of in relation to that, could you talk a bit about kind of as a director or as a maker? Could you talk a bit about kind of your process? Did your process change depending on what context you're working in, or what project you're approaching, or is there kind of is there a Maeve Stone way of working?
It's definitely evolved over the years. Like, in college, I was just sort of working it out. So I did a lot of watching and seeing what other people were doing, and sort of learning and borrowing and stealing and bending and all of that. And then when I finished college, I set up a little theatre company called Spilt Gin with a playwright. And the focus for the work that I made for the first 3 or 4 years outside of college was really sort of investigating new writing, and sort of young voices, the challenge of staging things that are in process with no money and 1,000 people. So that was really interesting and very fast learning. And then out of that, I ended up in a sort of a weird section of my career, which was basically I was the resident assistant director at the Abbey, while also being assistant director for Pan Pan Theatre Company. So I was, I guess, on pause in terms of my own work for a year or two as I made some money, and was working in professional rooms observing different processes. But there was a really funny symmetry that happened where I was working at the Abbey, and the RAD program that they had at the time, you would be there for the year and you'd assist whoever was programmed. And it was Selena Cartmell's debut on the main stage, and she did King Lear. And simultaneously, Gavin Quinn decided to do a version of King Lear set in Andrew Bennett's apartment. So it was a real head melter to be working on the national stage on this quite kind of traditional interpretation of Lear with Owen Rowe, and it was stunning, big production, bells and whistles, loads of money. And then the other side of that, you know, 3 months, I was back into the room with King Lear, but this time in a recreated version of Andrew Bennett's apartment, and you know, kind of very, very post-traumatic interpretation. Like, one of the characters was a live hamster, for example. So that was my year of Lear. That was weird. And then the other side of that, I guess, I came back to my own process, trying to figure out what all of those experiences had actually meant. And I think that was when my voice as an artist started to gain its strength, I guess. And that would have been when I started to work in a really collaborative way with different people, started working on more site-specific projects, working really closely with Music Always and composers like Tom Lane on a variety of projects at that time. Yeah, so kind of, I think working with Pan Pan in particular taught me a lot about the kind of work that I was interested in making, which was a bit more experimental, and tended to bring together people from different backgrounds into quite an open, collaborative process.
Okay.
And yeah.
We talk about that sort of that I find it really, really fascinating. That kind of bringing people together from different backgrounds and different contexts into that open space, and how that's led or not led, or what's your process through that, even to give an idea of just and being.
Yeah. Well, where I'm at now is an attempt at something that takes a lot of work and sometimes it's quite painful, which is aiming as much as possible for a horizontal process. And what that means and looks like is that the last two big projects that I've made have been working side by side with equal stakes creative partners. So Unwoman is a project that I made with a radical feminist company from Melbourne called The Rabble. And that's Emma Vellante and Kate Davis. And Emma is a lighting designer, director, and writer. And Kate is a costume designer, director, and set designer. Then there was myself working as director, composer, writer, and Alwyn Frere as performer. And I think the really interesting thing with that process was recognizing that it is possible to make work where there isn't, air director, there isn't like a top of the ladder dictating down. And I felt very, very female, partly because of the subject matter. We were looking at bodily autonomy in pregnancy, but also because of how we managed it. And there was, a lot of communicating, sort of a very generous approach to ideas. I think it works better with devising process where you're not building out of a writer's script as such, but you're building towards a kind of a map or script. It's difficult. It's difficult, and it's really worthwhile. I think it's the version of making that I want to continue to aspire to. And it's certainly what I began work on Bodies of Water, which was the last big project that I made for stage, with Owen Carrick, Jonah King, and Frank Sweeney, and an amazing performer, Una Kavanagh. We were all sitting in equal positions in that. So there was no one directorial voice leading that project. And I think in a weird way, it can be kind of a normal and natural thing if everybody understands it from the beginning. Yeah.
I'm wondering as well, just something I've been thinking about a lot, and just when you said it there, I'm wondering, is the experience of being in a band kind of assist that process? Because it's kind of, not to make tribe comparisons, but being in a rehearsal room with a band can be quite similar to what you've just described. That
Yeah, I think that's a really, really good observation. I had never thought of that, but yeah, because like anyone who's been in a band will have that understanding or feeling for it's like being in a five-way relationship. That's what makes it hard. Communication can be really tricky sometimes, and you have to work hard to make it a healthy, good place for everyone. But it is similar in that there is no overlord unless somebody self-nominates as that, and
well,
yeah.
Normally bad stuff happens then.
Yeah.
Dave, can I ask you, through your life or career, was there a piece of art or an event or a performance or a film or something that kind of changed your life, but kind of had a deep impact on you, or something that you kind of keep coming back to if it's a piece of work, or something that you saw, or is there a number of things, or does it change?
Kind of all of the above. I think it changes regularly. I think there are things that I go back to a lot, and I'm sure that there are critical moments of transformation connected to art. Trying to pick some out is always tricky, though. It's like what's your favorite song is a question. I'll tell you what, though, because there is one thing that I've kind of leaned on more than once, and sometimes I go back to it and I'm like, oh, this is shit, and then other times I'm like, it's so beautiful and foundational. Is the work of Charlie Kaufman as a baseline. I find really inspiring. I got a chance to see him speaking at the Dublin Film Festival a few weeks ago. he looks really well for his age, might I say.
How old is he?
He's in his 60s. I couldn't believe it. And Mark O'Halloran did the interview. He was brilliant,
Yeah.
really, really charming. Like the two that I want him to cast Mark in his next film. I think that needs to happen. But Charlie Kaufman, I think his brain is so weird and beautiful, and it just makes normal things strange in a way that helps you understand them in a new way, and that's really appealing to me at a creative level. But he, and I can't remember when it was, but it was a good few years ago, probably about 10 years ago. He spoke at the BFI in London, and the speech that he gave is available. You can get it on SoundCloud, and it just had a really profound effect on me. And I remember at the time, it's going to sound really stupid, but at the time I was wrestling with like social media and Facebook in particular, and I wanted not to use it, and it was the thing that gave me clarity. And basically I deleted my Facebook. It was 2012. I deleted my Facebook after I watched it, and I never went back. But that's a really sort of trite story. I think that the thing that it does, or it's continued to do for me when I've gone back to it, is it reinforces a sense of foundational value. And he talks about the wound inside of us all, and the thing that we're trying to fill with art and with creativity. And I think if you're hunting for clarity or conviction to follow an idea, it's something that I find really useful.
Yeah. They're brilliant words, and very active words, like kind of hunting or conviction, that sense of search. And I think what's interesting to me, I mean, currently obviously we're working with is on a climate adaptation project. So I mean, not to necessarily talk about the project fully, but even to talk about that in relation to, I suppose, the bridge between art and activism, or the bridge between art and social change, and kind of how that feeds into your own work, Maeve.
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of artists probably feel the same way sometimes. It can feel a little bit ambiguous as to how the things that you do actually have an impact on the world or connect to people. And so I guess the first big moment for me was in 2015, feeling completely useless in the face of the refugee crisis that was happening. Really questioning whether anything I was doing mattered in that context. Like, does making a play matter when there are thousands and thousands of people dying in the Mediterranean every day? That was kind of at the heart of the crisis for me at a personal level. And I was lucky in that there was two amazing women who were also sort of asking the same questions, Maeve Stone and Una Murphy, and the three of us decided to band together as a little collective called Change of Address, and to use whatever access or platforms we had to actively impact on the local context for that emergency, which would have been direct provision and asylum seekers arriving in Ireland. So we spent, I guess, as a project, it ran for 5 years until this year, and kind of took a million different forms. But it did teach me an awful lot about the other side of the skill set that I've developed as an artist. Because once you take your toolkit and you march over into a different context and you say, okay, these are the things I know how to do, these are the things I know I'm able to do and that I'm good at, how can I use them in a practical way in this completely different context? And that was really important to learn, because it's taught me that I can do that. And I guess more recently, the thing that feels like an existential driver for me, and in terms of like at a moral level, it feels imperative to respond and to channel a good portion of my energy and thinking into, is the climate crisis. And so the last couple of years I've been working towards that with my tools from the creative trade. So the project that we're working on is kind of very much an investigation of that. What is the value of the artist as a creative thinker in a process where we're, as a society, having to adapt to circumstances that are completely unknown. And I think at a very primary level, I just believe it. I believe it. I think, yeah.
No, I think it's fascinating because, so just to give some context to people that might know, it's an EU project around climate adaptations called Cultural Adaptations, and it's Creative Carbon Scotland are the lead partner, and we're working with a gang from Sweden called Tilt and a gang from Belgium called Green Track in Ghent. And I suppose the thrust of it is, as you say, Maeve, to look at the role of the artist and creativity within the climate, adaptation sphere, but also to develop kind of new paradigms and new business models for, say, arts, but for artists and for arts organizations. And I suppose what was brilliant for me engaging with it is the fact of looking at the artist as a person with that toolkit going into a non-arts arena, and not to go in and come out and make a piece of work or make a dance or make a play, but actually to exist within that realm as a person with that toolkit. And that is really, 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 really interesting. For me, it reflects back on our work and placement within the kind of community that we serve, or the city that we kind of serve here. But maybe kind of talk about that in relation to, like, it's not Maeve going in to make a piece, it's Maeve going into stir.
Disrupt. Yeah. I guess the way that I think about it is that we have very complex systems in our social structure, and each one delivers an outcome in the same way, and it is predicted, and everybody that works inside of those systems is inheriting knowledge and understanding of how it has always been. And I think the thing that's interesting in this moment is that each of those systems now has to shift it by degrees into a new shape so that it can function in a sustainable way, so that it can promote and feed into a resilient society and community, where we have adapted to a future where our climate is different, where our the needs of our communities are very different, where the things that make us secure and insecure are shifting, which is a waffly way of saying what I understand of my own position inside of this project is to be a rogue voice at the table, so that in these organizations, be they local authorities or private enterprise, that they see the opportunity of bringing an artist into the room in order to try and get to a different outcome. Because if you bring the same people to the table to try and discover completely new ideas to get you to this new place that we all need to get to, it's going to be a very different conversation than if you can include ingredients and minds and ideas from people who are coming with completely different perspective on things. And I buy into it. Like I see the value in it. I think if the other partners in those kinds of conversations can also recognize the value in having somebody who's sort of frame for the world is vastly different, is a really interesting proposition.
Yeah, and I think a lot of the time that journey, it's like in any collaboration, I suppose, but particularly when you're dealing with people who may not be au fait with the arts process or might be actually scared of that kind of the disruption. It's getting beyond that fear. It's getting someone, or a number of people into a space where, look, this is not a scary thing. Letting go.
Yeah.
I think your point is brilliantly well made about getting the same people around the table to solve something again and again is going to lead versions of the same outcome.
Well, it's that definition of madness, isn't it? To repeat an action and expect a different outcome. So the position that we're in collectively, globally at the moment, is needing to create maps from nothing, because we can't see what the future is going to look like, but we know that it is a different landscape. It's a different, cultural, social, geographical landscape. It may be that our island has different borders or less land mass, or who knows. So there's a future of possibility and impossibility. And the thing that feels true is that, you know, we are professional imaginers. You know, we're professional uh, creative hunters. We're always looking for something that doesn't exist yet. And I think that's where, you know, creative thinkers are an asset at this time in any context, with the right sort of methodology, I guess, hopefully underneath any conversation. You're going to disrupt in a way that is going to get the other people in that conversation to a different position, even if it's, you know, to the left of where you need to get to still. It's gonna offer something new.
Yeah, I think, and it's funny, a lot of the conversations we've been having around, say, in this enforced downtime, or, you know, shift time, or a lockdown time that we're all in, there is an opportunity to, you know, potentially reframe the artist within, you know, not society is probably the wrong phrase, but reframe the artists within their communities in relation to a separation of the making of the art and the person with that toolkit. And I think there's a massive opportunity, which has been begun with, you know, a lot of the different kind of government organizations, but an opportunity to kind of push that further and put more people in rooms to, you know, shift that thinking a bit.
Because I mean, if you have succeeded in creating a career as an artist, you are an innovator, and you are also self-producer, and you are self-motivated, and you are capable of synthesizing different kinds of information into a clear understanding of where you want to get to, even if you haven't been there before. And there is a really unique palette of skills that are synonymous with making, and particularly devising, actually, because a lot of that's to do with meeting people from different contexts and searching for clear and shared language around the process, and then building the scaffolding that you want to step into and begin to work around. Yeah, I hope, if nothing else, out of this conversation, if one or two people see it and think, you know, I could be an embedded artist. I could find somebody in my local authority, councillor, small business in the town I live in. I could work with somebody, because we've got an awful lot of businesses on a precipice now. We've got this moment of hard reset where the things that we care about in our communities are being set in stark relief against a future of uncertainty. And so is there a way for artists to step into that role, self-nominate, and say, I'm going to reach out to that, you know, local publishing company, and I'm going to say, I don't know where we might get to, but if we can have a couple of conversations about what you're facing at the moment, I might have something to offer that is something you didn't think about, or like there might be some value there, or, you know, a local cafe or a sports group, or, you know, I don't know what the model needs to be, but I think artists as rogue agents, just self-seeding into the community to sort of build resilience and sustainability for projects and people that really matter to a healthy community, feels really important.
Brilliant. Well, that's a fantastic note to finish on. I'm not going to be able to top that. Maeve, thanks very much for joining me as part of the series, and I shall chat to you again soon. Thanks a million.
Brilliant. Thanks a million, Mark.
Bye.